All right, so this is my video showing differentiation by content. So a couple of notes. This is a decision-making style lesson that will be done through multiple times throughout the year, so students can continue to kind of build on those skills that they've mastered. It's a complicated, gifted strategy, but with prior knowledge checks and kind of scaffolding throughout, students are able to be really successful with it. So while the content includes both the gifted standards and third grade science standards, since this is a gifted classroom, we are focusing all of our skills, concepts, and learning targets, etc., on those gifted standards. Okay, so what do I want my students to know? These are standards, there's 3 standards, and they're all in the higher order critical thinking skills domain. So standard 3, the student conducts comparisons using criteria. Standard 4, the student makes and evaluates decisions using criteria. And standard 5, the student predicts probable consequences of decisions. So students will, skills-wise, they will obtain, evaluate, and communicate. The concepts for obtaining is obtaining information about the topic using different artifacts. For this particular lesson, it will be an article and a video clip. Evaluating potential solutions using brainstormed criteria, and then finally communicating how they made that final decision. So their learning targets, they'll be able to use artifacts and prior knowledge to brainstorm potential solutions to a problem and criteria for evaluating each solution. They will be able to use a data matrix to compare each criterion, and they will be able to clearly communicate the reasons. The success criteria, and this is what we will talk about as a class after kind of reviewing what standards we're covering. Students will know that they're successful when they can brainstorm relevant solutions and criteria, make comparisons using criteria, and clearly communicate their reasons. Okay, so in determining what students already know, I'm going to give all of the students, this is like a version of a formative diagnostic check, practicing the parts of the creative problem-solving process. And so basically, I like to use this because it breaks it down into ways that are really relevant to them. So for example, they're learning fact versus opinion. So 3 facts about the classroom versus 3 opinions. And so once we get into the actual decision-making lesson, it also pulls in that content from their science class. But this way I'm able to see, do they have any deficiencies in the actual type of thinking that they're going to need for the decision-making process. So I will give everybody this, and that would be a few days before the actual lesson. And then students will be grouped in 2 different ways. They'll be grouped into the creative problem solving group, CPS, and the decision making group, DM, based on the results of this activity. And the students in the CPS group will not be given a problem statement. This will make more sense in a minute when I show you the paper. But basically, they are backing up and going to have a little bit more of a convoluted start to the project because they're going to be given artifacts, but they have to determine what the problem is, versus the decision-making group is going to start with a problem statement and be able to practice the additional steps from that point forward. Additionally, data from the prior knowledge activity will determine if they are going to be generating their own solutions or if they'll be given 3 possible solutions. So there's the solution generating group and solution given group. Might sound a little bit complicated, but basically all that means is that pages 2 and 5 of the packet will be different depending on which group that they're in. And you might have a student that is in the CPS group that is given the solutions. They might be in the decision-making group where they're able to generate their own solutions. It just kind of depends on where their particular strengths lie. Okay, so this is just an example of the artifact. In step 1, they have an artifact and they're going to annotate and highlight. They have this article about the Mexican gray wolf, and then there's also a video clip on the Mexican gray wolf. Then they will be able to find their own artifact if they want to. So for the creative problem solving group, they are going to be given a paper that looks like this, where they have to determine what the problem is. This is a potential problem that the decision-making group will be given. So the disagreement over whether or not Mexican gray wolf should continue to be protected under the Endangered Species Act. All right, They will all answer the questions, who does the problem affect? So they've got to brainstorm, and excuse me, how can they decide if the decision is best? So everybody will brainstorm 5 criteria, which are basically just questions about how they can evaluate each of the solutions. So is it reasonable, cost effective, etc. So everybody's solution or everybody's criteria are going to look a little bit different. All right, then they'll be given a blank matrix. This just shows an example of a completed one. The solutions group will not have the solutions filled in, but the other group that showed that they need a little more support with this will be given the 3 solutions. They'll be generating criteria. So students will work to fill out this matrix. They will be deciding if they're ranking it as a 1 or 3, being the best or the worst solution. And then they're going to be giving their justifications for why they ranked it. So for example, this particular group for is it reasonable, they said that, excuse me, that it was least reasonable to remove the Mexican gray wolf from the endangered species list. But they said it was most reasonable for keeping it on the federal endangered species list. Then when they get to the end and they filled out their matrix, depending on which direction they decided the numbers were going to go in this case, we said the high number was the solution, and so they've arrived at their solution. Then they are going to explain their decision using justifications from the artifacts, and finally communicate that decision. And that's where they get some additional choices as well into how they want to communicate that decision. Students will be assessed using the decision-making rubric, and that's it.